There was a time when Australia looked at UFOs not as entertainment, not as internet folklore, but as a problem, a security problem, an aviation problem, a defense problem. And when the sky produced something that could not be immediately explained, the Royal Australian Air Force wrote it down. Tonight, we go inside those files. Not rumours, not recycled legends, but cases preserved through the National Archives of Australia, records from the era when the RAAF investigated what it called unusual aerial sightings. And what those files reveal is not a government chasing little green men. It is something more serious than that. It is a government managing uncertainty. During the Cold War, during the weapons age, during the early space era, and when anything unexplained in the sky had to be treated as potentially important. Tonight, we focus on three cases: the Sea Fury incident, the Woomera and Maralinga sightings, and the disappearance of Frederick Valentich. Three cases, three environments, one pattern. Australia did not have to believe in UFOs to take them seriously. Welcome back to UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I'm your host, Matt Tones, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're diving into the Australian archives. Not rumours, not recycled folklore, not internet mythology. This episode is built around the National Archives of Australia and what those records reveal about the period when the Royal Australian Air Force investigated UFO reports, or in the language of that time, unusual aerial sightings. The key point is this: Australia did not investigate these reports because it believed in little green men. It investigated them because during the Cold War and the space race, unexplained things in the sky were treated as national security question. That is the first thing worth understanding. The RAAF kept records because the government thought it was prudent to pay attention. Many public sightings were later explained away as aircraft, Venus, the moon, or other ordinary cases. But the archive makes clear that reports from trained military personnel were harder to dismiss outright. So today's episode looks at three cases highlighted by the National Archives record: the Sea Fury incident of 1954, the Woomera or Maralinga area sighting of 1960, and the Frederick Valentich disappearance of 1978. Together, these cases tell us how Australia handled the UFO question and when it was still treated as an operational problem, not just a media spectacle. Let's begin with the Sea Fury incident. On 31st of August 1954, Royal Australian Navy pilot Lieutenant J.A. O'Farrell was returning to the Naval Air Station at Nowra on a night flight in a Hawker Sea Fury. According to the National Archives, O'Farrell saw first one and then a second bright light flying nearby. He described each object as having a vague shape, with a white light positioned centrally on top. As the objects kept pace with his aircraft, he radioed Nowra, and the base confirmed that the unknown craft were also registering on radar. After a period of pacing the aircraft, the lights accelerated away to the northeast at tremendous speed and disappeared. The archives notes plainly that the nature of these fast-moving objects remains a mystery. That case matters for one reason above all others. This was not just a member of the public looking up at a strange light. This was a military aviator in flight making a report in real time with radar confirmation from the ground. Now, does that prove extraterrestrial origin? No. But in intelligence terms, it elevates the case. Because once you have a trained pilot plus instrument corroboration, the event moves out of the category of casual anecdote and into the category of a serious unidentified incident. That gives us the first intelligence takeaway. The RAAF era files are most interesting when witnesses' credibility and technical corroboration overlap. Now we move to Woomera and Maralinga, where the UFO question collided with one of the most sensitive defense environments in Australia. The National Archives holds a confidential two-page report on sightings from the 15th of July 1960 near Wewak, close to the Maralinga weapons testing area in South Australia. The report was written by Security Officer J.J.A. Hanlon and originally formed part of a Department of Supply file on the Weapons Research Establishment. The archives explains that the investigation took place inside the broader Woomera prohibited area, where top secret weapons and nuclear-related testing activity was underway. This is what makes the case so important. The area was already saturated with secrecy, defense sensitivity, and scientific activity. That meant unexplained aerial phenomena were automatically treated with more seriousness than they would be in an ordinary civilian setting. The archives say there were multiple reasons for the thoroughness of the investigation: national security, scientific curiosity, and control of unwelcome public interest. Several dozen witnesses were interviewed across associated reports, including Commonwealth Police, Weapons Research Establishment staff, armed forces personnel, a patrol officer, and members of the public. In other words, this was not a casual someone saw something file. It was investigated because the location itself made uncertainty unacceptable. What is especially interesting is how the report handled explanation. The archive notes that experts consulted around the Wewak sightings proposed a range of possibilities, including a flying saucer or satellite cone, but also a meteor, static electricity, the effects of weather balloons, and even the reflection of distant vehicle lights on a low inversion layer. Hanlon's report concluded that all avenues of inquiry had been covered and that the source of light could not be positively identified, although it was felt the light was most likely the result of either a meteor or static electricity. That gives us the second intelligence takeaway. The RAAF era system was not designed to prove UFOs, it was designed to exhaust ordinary explanations first, and that is a very important distinction. The archives does not read like a disclosure file, it reads like an uncertainty management file. Now we move to the best known case in the National Archives UFO material, Frederick Valentich, and we touched on this on our last episode. On the 21st of October in 1978, civilian pilot Frederick Valentich disappeared over Bass Strait while flying from Moorabbin in Melbourne, Victoria, to King Island. Before radio contact was lost, he reported a strange object with four bright lights hovering above him. The National Archives notes that the disappearance of an aircraft while the pilot was reporting a UFO created a media sensation and gave rise to theories of alien abduction. But the archives also highlights the more prosaic explanation advanced by later researchers. Valentich was a UFO enthusiast, had reported a previous sighting, and on the night of the flight, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Antares were highly visible in a diamond-like formation. Combined with his relative inexperience, that bright celestial arrangement may have caused misidentification and a fatal distraction from his instruments. This is one of the reasons the Valentich case remains so powerful. It sits exactly on the line between anomaly and explanation. On one side, you have the chilling final radio report. On the other, you have a serious skeptical interpretation grounded in aviation error and celestial misidentification. The archives does not present the case as proof of extraterrestrial intervention, but it does preserve it as one of the most striking examples of how an aviation mystery can fuse permanently with the UFO question. That gives us the third intelligence takeaway. Some of the strongest UFO cases are not the ones with the weakest skeptical explanations. They're the ones where the skeptical explanation exists but still fails to extinguish the mystery. Now, step back and look at what the National Archives is telling us overall. First, The Australian government did take UFO reports seriously enough to document them, especially during a period shaped by Cold War anxiety and rapid aerospace change. Second, the files show a consistent pattern. Most public reports could be explained by ordinary causes, but some incidents involved trained observers, radar, or sensitive military locations remained harder to dismiss cleanly. Third, the investigative posture was conservative. The system was built to test for aircraft, celestial bodies, atmospheric effects, balloons, meteors, electrical phenomena, and other normal explanations before granting any case enduring anomalous status. And finally, the National Archive records show that this phase of official attention eventually ended. The archive states that the RAAF ceased investigating UFO sightings in 1994, reasoning that only about 3% of reports could not be explained by natural phenomena, and that these presented little or no threat to security. That is a striking endpoint because it tells us Australia did not move from UFO investigation to disclosure. It moved from UFO investigation to bureaucratic closure, not because every case was solved, but because the unresolved remainder was judged too small or too low threat to justify continued effort. So, if we had to summarize the RAAF UFO file error in one sentence, it would be this: Australia studied UFOs not as belief, but as risk. The Sea Fury case shows us a trained pilot with radar supported anomaly. The Woomera files show us a defense secrecy colliding with unexplained lights in a weapons zone. The Valentich case shows us how a disappearance can become permanently entangled with the unknown. None of these records prove extraterrestrial origin, but they do prove something else. For decades, Australia kept one eye on the sky, and when it could not immediately explain what was there, it wrote it down. This has been UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I'm Matt Tones. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell your mum about our podcast.